Hey guys, Chit of Headlines here to share a few software tutorials on how to set your timeline settings for any specific aspect ratio and how to interpret or process anamorphic footage. These will be covered in Premiere, After Effects, Resolve, and Final Cut Pro X. If you want to skip straight into the software, here are the exact time codes, and the description of the video has links directly to them. This is a new addition to the Anamorphic on a Budget guide, originally my graduation project in Brazil, then translated to English and published in my blog for free since 2015. I recently revised all the writing in there and updated some key concepts, links, higher res images. I improved the translation and made it into an overall better guide that you can buy at my store. The free version is still on the blog, but if you want a better version of it, or more importantly, if you want to support my work and research, get yourself one of the PDFs. They look great. There's a simple link in the description. Now let's get started. Here's how to define your aspect ratio and timeline settings. First, pick your width. 4K, 2K, Full HD, something else entirely. It is up to you. For this example, I chose Cinema 4K, 4096 pixels as my final width. Next, pick your aspect ratio, 2.4 to 1 CinemaScope, 2.2 to 1, 1.85 to 1. Again, it's your choice and how it serves your project. I'm going with CinemaScope, so 2.4 to 1 because it's so popular. The next step is to divide your frame width by the aspect ratio. So I'll divide Cinema 4K 4096 pixels by 2.4. 4096 divided by 2.4 equals 1706.666666. Round this number to the closest even integer, in this case 1706. Our timeline resolution in this project will be 4096 by 1706 pixels. In an ideal world, you also make the timeline height a value that gives you an integer when divided by 8. This is not mandatory in terms of aspect ratio, but it will improve the computer processes and give you more sub-pixel accurate results. Taking this into account, 1706 becomes 1704, as I prefer to round them down. To be clear, these numbers all change once you pick a different aspect ratio or final width. Get used to the math. Now, let's jump into software, and for all of the software examples, I'm going to use 4K 3840 pixels width and 2.66 to 1 aspect ratio. This means my timeline will be 3840 by 1440 pixels. Here we are, and we're gonna do our aspect ratio and de-stretching in After Effects. So let's load up After Effects. Just give it a second. I'm gonna create a new project, and this is what After Effects is giving me. So I'll go into the footage folder. This is all my GH5 4x3 shot with the Vazen lens, 28mm, so it's 1.8 stretch. And I'm just gonna drag this over back into my project in After Effects. Now we're gonna create a new composition by just clicking here, or Control N. We're gonna call this GH5 Vazen. And our timeline settings, we already know it's 3840 by 1440 as discussed before. Make sure the pixel aspect ratio is set to square pixels. There's a bunch of options here that you might be interested in, but keep it on square. The frame rate is the same as the footage, so mine is 23976, and hit OK. So this creates our timeline, and I'm going to drop a clip onto it. Well, we can see this is not looking very correct. Resize this for. There's a lot left on the top, a lot left on the bottom, nothing on the left and nothing on the right. But the footage is now stretched, so let's go into the previous method, which was pixel aspect ratio. So I'll right-click the footage and go into Interpret Footage, Main. So here we have other options, gives us the pixel aspect ratio, and it's set by default to square pixels. Here you can find 1.33, 1.5, or even 2, which are very common, but there's no 1.8 here. So the method that I'm going to show you is good for any stretch factor, and you don't have to rely on the pixel aspect ratio. I'm going to switch this to 2 so you can see what's happening. And everything became much bigger. Now we have leftovers on all sides, which means we're going to have to scale down our footage. So I'll go open the scale setting and scale it down, and oh, look at that, beautiful. It kind of almost works, except the stretch is wrong. So what is the point? We're gonna go back, we're gonna undo this. So to solve this problem, we're gonna use the calculator that is linked in the video description, and we're gonna put in all the numbers that we have. So I'm gonna go here, aspect ratio calculator, and our final frame width is 3840 as we discussed. Final aspect ratio is 2.66. Anamorphic squeeze is 1.8 because it's a Vasen lens. And this is our footage size. So let's see if we can find this in After Effects itself. It says up here 3328 by 2496. So we're going to put in these numbers into those fields. So 3328 by 2496. And we hit calculate. So this gives us our timeline settings, which is 3840 by 1440. Good thing we already knew that. But more importantly, this gives us our footage rescale setting, which is what's going to optimize the use of our pixels. And it also shows us our target framing here and how our footage is going to be after desqueezing. So we're losing about 10%, which is this top and bottom, and it's not bad at all. So let's put these numbers back into After Effects. I'm going to open the scale setting. First thing I got to do is unlink vertical and horizontal values. This is horizontal, so I'm going to go with 115.4 as said there. So we're noticing good stuff here. It maximized on the sides. And the vertical is 64.1. So let's do 64.1. And look at that, it's perfectly stretched. And it looks exactly like what we had in the calculator with a bit of leftover on the top and the bottom. Excellent. But let's say I add a bunch of other clips to here. So this is my edit, and I decided to edit in After Effects, which is a terrible idea, but here we are. So my first clip is doing great, and my second clip, not so much, and the third, not so much either. And I don't want to go manually and put all of these in here, so I'm just going to select the scale property on the first clip that I adjusted, select the other two clips, and just I'll copy this value. Well, select Control Copy, Command Copy, and paste. So Control V, Command D, and there we are. Desqueezed both of them with just one click. So all you got to do is desqueeze your first, and everything else is going to be fine. And this is how you do it in After Effects. Let's take a look at Premiere. We're going to start with loading it up. I'm going to go into this project, but you can just create a new one. And now that we're here, I'm going to import the footage. I have these GH5 clips shot using the Vasen. So you can see this is 4:3 and this is 1.8 stretch. And I'm going to bring them into the project. Here we are. Now I'm going to create a new timeline. So new sequence and go straight into settings. I'm going to change this to custom. The frame size, as we discussed, is 3840 and the height is 1440 because we want to keep it at 2.66 to 1. Make sure the pixel aspect ratio stays square pixels, and all this other stuff doesn't need changing. This is your frame rate, so mine is 2397.6, and this is what we're going to keep. I'm going to call this Vasen GH5. Now, if I drag the footage over, It's going to ask if I want to change the timeline settings. I'm going to keep the existing settings, and obviously it did not fit. Beautiful. Okay. In my previous method, and a lot of shortcuts just say go into the footage settings and change the pixel aspect ratio. So we right click the footage, go into modify, interpret footage. And here we got this pixel aspect ratio setting that is by default set to square. We can come here and change, and there's a bunch of popular formats here like 1.5 or 1.3333 or even 2, but you might notice there's no 1.8 like the Vason. So if we set it to 2, the clip's going to be stretched, but it's not stretched by the right amount. And it's also bigger than the timeline, like I can shrink, and it's just not right. So I'm going to undo this and undo the stretch. We're going to use the aspect ratio calculator that you can find in the description of this video. We're going to rescale this clip, and we're going to find out by how much. So let's go here. Okay, so our final frame width is indeed 3840, but our final aspect ratio is 2.66. The anamorphic squeeze that we have on is 1.8. And now this is the footage size. So I'm going to go find from the clip. Go into the clip, right click, properties, go into details, and I can see it's 3328 by 2496. So I'm going to put those numbers into the calculator. So the width is 3328 and this is 2496. Once I hit calculate, it's going to give me the timeline settings, which we already knew, 3840 by 1440. And it's going to give me the footage rescale, which is the fun part of this. It also gives me a nice preview of how much footage I'm losing. So I'm going to lose a little bit on the top and the bottom for this, and how much that is. So 10%. 10% is pretty great. I'm going to copy these numbers over back to Premiere. So here I'm going to uncheck uniform scale. The scale height is 64.1. So let's go 64.1. And the scale width is 115.4. 115.4. Boom. So here we see that there's a little bit left on the top and the bottom, but we notice that the clip is taking the full window and it's stretched by the perfect size. Cool. Now, do I have to do this for this clip and all of them? The fastest way is you just go into the first one that you adjusted. You click on the motion tab here into the effect controls, and you press Control C or Command C, copy. Select the clips you want to paste it on and paste. Boom. Rescale. Done. So now you have your timeline set to the proper aspect ratio and your lens desqueezing by the exact amount that you want. And you're done. You're good to edit and export, and this is it for Premiere. All right, let's get this started with Resolve. So I'm going to call it up and wait for it to load. I'm going to create a new project. And I'm using Studio, but everything here works the same in the free version. So here's our media pool. I'm just going to drag in the footage. These are my GH5 clips, 4x3, 1.8 times stretch, shot with the Vason lens. Put them here. Change. And now I'm going to go to the Edit tab. So I'm going to drag the first clip onto my timeline. Boom. And first of all, this created our timeline, and it does not look very right. So I'm going to right click the timeline, go into timelines, timeline settings. And this is relatively new. It's been here for 2 versions now, but you can use custom settings for different timelines. And we're going to just put in the values that we have, which is 3840 by 1440. And the pixel aspect ratio is square. You might be tempted for the other ones, but don't do it. This is our frame rate, which is the same as the footage. This is a very interesting setting about sizing. So Resolve is going to try to resize your footage for you. I'm just going to say center crop with no resizing. I just don't want Resolve to do anything. So, okay. Now we have black bars on the sides and we're losing the top and the bottom of the footage. So it kind of got worse, but we have the timeline settings right. So now we're going to use the aspect ratio calculator that you can find in the video description, and we're going to put in all the information that we have so it helps us figure out what we do from here. Let's go. Okay, so here we have our frame width, which is, well, 4K, so this is right. Our final aspect ratio is not 2.4, it's 2.66 to 1. Anamorphic squeeze is 1.8 for the Vason lens. Now the footage size comes from the GH5. So I'm gonna have to figure this out. I'm gonna go into my files, right click, and go into properties. If I go to details, it tells me my frame width and my frame height. And that's what I need. I'm gonna put those numbers into the calculator. So 3328 by 2496, and I'm gonna hit calculate. So here it tells me my timeline settings, which is 3840 by 1440. Oh, I wish I used the calculator earlier so I wouldn't have to guess those numbers. And it also tells me the footage rescale, so how much I have to resize horizontally and vertically to make the best use of the footage. And here it gives me a nice preview of my target size, that's the dark rectangle, and what's gonna be cropped out of the footage, which is the outside, the striped lines. So we're losing about 10% of our footage, which is not bad at all. So let's bring this back into Resolve. In Resolve, scale is called zoom. So in the inspector, you unlink those two, and you might also notice that this is given in percent, but Resolve uses units. So we're gonna kind of just do 1.154, so that's 115.4 from percentage to absolute values. Boom, that's that. And on Y, we're going to do 0.541. No, that's wrong. 64.1, so I put the wrong number in. So 0.641. And basically dividing these numbers by 100 to get these values. You can see they're not that different. And by doing this, you can see that the footage now fits perfectly on our frame. We don't have black bars anywhere, and our stretch is also correct. So that's pretty cool. Great, we did it. But what about the other clips here? Not so cool, huh? I'm just gonna zoom in. When I drag over, I don't really want to have to do this again, so I'm gonna right click on this first clip, go into copy, or just Control C, Command C, and I'll select the other two clips and right click. There's Alt V, which is paste attributes. So paste attributes, and this gives us all the attributes from the inspector that we can paste, and all we want is the zoom. So everything stays unchecked and we just check the zoom box and we apply. So this stretches out the footage perfectly to the same settings as the first clip, and here we are, we have our timeline working. And this is how you do things in DaVinci Resolve. Now you just go to export and you're done. Let's get started on Final Cut Pro. So I'm just gonna call it up. Spoilers. Here's Final Cut, and we're gonna import media. That's the first thing we're gonna do. And here's Final Cut, so I'm just gonna drag in our footage, which is here. Drag it over. Cool. So from there, I'll create a new project. Here I'm gonna call this GH5 Vason, and this is the event. So this you set as you please. The video format is not quite what we wanted, so we're going to change video to custom, and here we're going to use the numbers that we agreed upon, 3840 by 1440. This is the frame rate. We're going to keep the same, and all of this, use your favorite settings. Hit OK. This gives us our beautiful timeline, and I'm just gonna drag the footage over. So all the clips are here, and there's a bunch of black sides on the left and the right, and the clip has been rescaled. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna change a very important setting about automatically rescaling, because Final Cut Pro just wants to help you out, set everything to fit on the timeline, but that's not quite what we want here. So we're gonna go on to, in the inspector for the clip, go to the bottom, there's a spatial conform setting there, and it's by default set to fit. Set it to none. So now the clip has been scaled to its original correct size, and it's much bigger. You can see that the black sides have been reduced, but we also lost a lot on the top and the bottom. And this is where our aspect ratio calculator will come in. You can find it in the video description, and this is it. So this is our final frame width, which is the same. It's 4K, doesn't change. The final aspect ratio does though, because we're doing 2.66. Anamorphic squeeze is 1.8, and this is our footage size. So this comes from the camera. And we're gonna go back into Final Cut. Here in the inspector, you can go into this info tab, and it gives you the resolution of the footage. So it's 3328 by 2496. We're gonna put that into the calculator. 3328 by 2496, and we're gonna hit calculate. So this shows us how our footage is going to look like. The gray area is our target area, and the outside is what's being cropped out of the footage. We're losing about 10%, so that's not bad. Our timeline settings would be 3840 by 1440, which we kind of knew, but we could have started with this instead of all the math that I explained in the previous part of the video. And this is the fun part. This is the footage rescale to achieve this result, so we don't lose footage on all sides. This is horizontal and this is vertical. So we're going to put these numbers back into Final Cut. Back into the inspector, we have up here scale. So scale X is horizontal. We're going to do 115.4. That looks good. And scale Y is going to be 64.1. So 64.1. And if we show the control sizes, you can see that this matches exactly what the calculator said, with a perfect fit on the sides and a little bit of loss on the top and the bottom. Great stuff. But now we did this for one clip. What about the others? Not so good. So we're gonna copy this. So Command copy, and then while selecting both clips, or whatever many clips you want to paste it on, you're gonna go select them all, go into edit, and then paste attributes. There's a hotkey for it, but I'm not that Mac familiar, so paste attributes. And it pastes by default only the attributes that you have changed. So you can see the spatial conform that we changed and the scale. And as soon as we paste fit, you can see that this is perfectly resized to what we wanted. So from here you can edit, you can go to your delivery. This is all you have to do to achieve your correct aspect ratio and your perfect anamorphic Desqueeze in Final Cut Pro.
Phew! That was the last of them. These are all basic examples, and the guide covers a few different versions, especially when shooting ratios other than 16:9 on cameras like anamorphic modes. The math is still the same though, so if you got that worked out, you're good to go. Check the link in the description for the guide. How useful are these post-production tutorials? Let me know in the comments below and by liking the video. If you want more anamorphic shooting, hit subscribe now because there's always more. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Verheddings out.